We're filming today at the S&P Dow Jones Indices event, Embracing Change as Our Opportunity in South Africa. And I'm delighted to be joined by Zach Besadenhout of S&P Dow Jones Indices, as well as Nerina Visser of ETFSA. Nerina, I'd like to start with you. Perhaps talk to us a bit about the local market developments and trends that are impacting the investment landscape.
So I think one of the interesting, unique features about the South African market is that much like the stock exchange, it is dominated by the commodity space. So even when we look at the ETF industry in South Africa, almost half of the assets under management in this industry is actually physical commodities, which I think is quite unique and unusual in the global context. But when I look at the development in terms of the 18 years that exchange-traded funds have been available in South Africa, we see a strong growth at the moment in two particular areas. The one is the shift from traditional passive market cap weighted indices towards the use of more smart beta or factor-based strategies. And I think the other one that is really interesting is to see the extent to which the range of global ETF products that are made available to the South African market is expanding, really bringing much more range and opportunity to the South African investor.
Great, Zach, and if I can turn to you, the SPIVA survey that you produce, perhaps share with us some of the results from that SPIVA survey and the key trends coming out of that.
Yeah, so the SPIVA survey that we have is one of a few that we run across the globe. So the South African results doesn't look any different to what you would expect from the global results, in that if we look at about a 3 to 5 year period, about 80% of all active managers do underperform the benchmarks. And we can see that that might be some interest in the new ETFs that we see in the market, and the interest in ETFs is maybe the pension funds and the investors are waking up to this and saying, well, maybe there is alternative options than just going active, to consider some of the passive solutions coming on board to the JSE.
So that's a great segue into the adoption of passive strategies. So perhaps, Nerina, looking at the adoption of passive strategies in South Africa, I mean, what sorts of trends are you seeing and how are investors responding to the trends in terms of that adoption of passive strategies?
So I think in South Africa it's still dominated by a retail investor base, especially on the ETF side of it. Within unit trusts or collective investment schemes and segregated portfolios, we do see increasing participation from institutional investors. And that's really the area where I think Zach is absolutely right in terms of where there's a new way of embracing passive and embracing indexation is now starting to be used. It's early days. There's really a very low base from which this will be done, but I do think that's where the biggest growth opportunity in this market resides.
And Zach, any perspective to add on that in terms of that growth of passive in the South African market? Where do you see the investor base actually going? Would it be an institutional play or retail play? How do you see that playing out in the next few years?
Yes, I think as more and more products become available to investors, I think Nerina mentioned that we're probably looking at another 15 hitting the JSE within the next few months. So as those options become broader, you can now develop quite complex strategies for institutional investors, but also from a DIY perspective for a retail investor, all of those building blocks are now in place for them to actually construct an investment strategy. The advisors are still very important, so to give advice of how to structure some of these building blocks into a full solution for clients, but we're very excited to see all the new products coming on board.
And Zach, we've also heard here today about investors potentially using, some of the more sophisticated investors using these ETFs as instruments or security types in order to gain exposure, tactical exposure to particular sources of beta. Do you want to comment on what you've seen on that?
Yes, I think ETFs, again, it's just a vehicle, and the powerful thing of this is it is actually trading on an exchange. So you can see it as a long-term investment, you can see it as a short-term tactical allocation, and you can use it for various types of exposure within your investment strategy, as single stock securities or tilting to a certain factor or an asset class. It's a very useful tool to be used, not just an exposure to one index.
We've been filming here at the S&P Dow Jones Indices event, Embracing Change as Our Opportunity in South Africa. And that was Zach Besadenhout of S&P Dow Jones Indices, as well as Nerina Visser of ETFSA.